Everybody got a good show for y'all. Question that we thinking about on the other side is, how is achievement dropping, but grad rates are rising on the other side? Oh, it's still brand new year, all that good stuff. That's David. I'm Charles. Our other two partners are out busy today because it's the beginning of the year. But David made it. He made it. It was tight, but it was close. But he made it, and I'm hating on him because he has sun where he's at. He's sweating, and it's hot here too. It's a nice -4 degrees right now. You know what I mean? Might need to go outside and get my tan on, But how are you doing, David?
I'm good. I'm excited about today's show. Like I said, I didn't want to, we always kind of default to talking about the weather, but you definitely have some weather going on, and we have some weather going on. So I'm glad to hear that you are staying warm in your situation, right?
This situation. People live like that.
What is your current temperature right now?
It's about, well, it actually went up. It's like 2 or 3 degrees now, which is warmer. But the wind chill is still around -26, -27. But you just learn how to dress for it. I actually just had on a jacket that wasn't too much bigger than this. Long johns, baby, long johns. Long johns work really, really well. So, but it's all good, man. We surviving and we good out here. My heart is going to, there's still a homeless population, and you got all these migrant workers and stuff coming in, and there's some disarray there. And I don't think these folks were planning on or banking on coming to a Chicago winter. I think they were trying to get to Texas, Arizona, in them areas. So it's interesting. But my prayers are out for any of those people.
For sure, man. Things are good. I'm just, it's been another interesting, dynamic week in the news, and so I've just been trying to process all of it. Everything from recognizing or coming to the reality that the United States is now basically active in a global war, right? Again, in the Middle East, and so it's like, okay, what are the implications there? They don't have to declare war anymore, right? These are like non-state actors. It's just a very different landscape where they can just kind of sell weapons to whoever they want. And now we're dropping bombs on the Houthi rebels, because you can't stop the capitalism beast, right? We got to get the goods must continue to ship. That's number one. And then number two, just been following some of the national political stuff with Trump coming out, victorious from the.
He didn't just come out victorious. He got
the Iowa. I think they're called the Iowa Caucasians. Oh, the caucus. It's like watching those rooms of older white people passing their votes, and everyone's like, yeah. I'm like, I mean, at least put some plants in there. Get somebody from the kitchen. Get somebody who's driving a car. I mean, do something. But there's no shade. They're just like, no, this is what it is.
He won by 30 points. He won by 30 points. Nikki was second and 30 points away. I think he's gonna try to have Vivek be his running mate. I feel like I can see that happening. But it's interesting, man. I mean, I'm paying attention to it and watching. But yeah, man, our world is in
it's crazy, man.
I mean, is it ever not at this point? What I mean? If the sky's falling every day, then it's if everything is an emergency, then nothing's an emergency. So, it's just kind of rejiggering our goals, bro. It's what's my new normal, so I can know what's normal now and what's
exactly
out of whack. Because if everything is is up here. If everything is extreme, then nothing's going to be extreme. It starts to lose value. So, you
right.
know,
The new normal is like denying that slavery ever happened. Right.
I mean, it's crazy.
That's just like it's like, hey, if we keep saying it, people will start believing it, right? Or something like 70% of the people that were polled at the caucuses believed that the last election was rigged. I'm like, they're all crazy.
I mean, look, man, it's a new day and age, and we're gonna have to see, man. I mean, there was a generation of kids that lived through the Cold War. I don't know if you are a full Cold War baby like that and had to, So I mean, you try to take it in stride and try to do the best you can. Oh, yeah. If I start reacting to everything, then I'll just be reacting all day. That's it. You know what I mean? So, but
exactly.
But and also being in the Chicago area, there's a lot of, Iowa's not that far. So this is when those folks get to kind of have some power and get to feel like they're part of a like they play a larger role since they're a smaller state.
Exactly.
That comes out, but these caucuses they matter when you're trying to become the nominee. So anyway, man, I got a whole bunch of text messages from the Biden campaign. They was they blow your phone up, they blow your email up, and I think with that performance, we definitely are going to be getting a lot of. If you ever gave your phone number to either of these parties at any time, get ready. They about to ask for money every day.
That's right. It's coming. Well, it's interesting because this whole thing of looking at some of these polling numbers coming out of Iowa and the support that Trump is getting, and the people that still kind of like believe him. I think it all comes down to education, right? And that's what we talk about on this show. And people are, I wouldn't even say formally educated, but formal education plays a part. If you're lacking even the basic skills to be able to interpret, think critically, even going down to like being able to read words on a piece of paper, it's going to be very easy to become manipulated, right? And that's kind of what's happening right now with a lot of people, and they don't even realize it. So today's topic, we are talking about obviously education, and it's a big, again, it's going to be part of this like election cycles dialogue, but not necessarily the way that we're going to talk about it today, right? Mm-hmm. And so today what we're talking about is a trend. I wouldn't even call it a trend. Well, maybe I'll call it a trend. So on one end, what we're seeing across the country, and we'll talk about specific examples soon, are rising graduation rates. So we're talking specifically about African American students and Latino students, which is positive. So we are seeing higher percentages of Black and Brown students across the country that are graduating from high school, right? That's something that everybody should be able to get behind. The problem is that at the same time that graduation rates are going up, we're actually seeing a decline in proficiency rates, which mainly focus on English, language arts, literacy, and mathematics. So if you had a bar graph, you would have two lines that are kind of going like this, right? One's going up and one's kind of staying flat. And so you have a gap. And so, I think at the end of the day, what that tells me is that we are sending far too many young people, Black and Brown young people, unprepared into the world of work, the world of military, the world of into the community, into higher education, right? And there's implications for all of those things. And again, we're only talking about public schools. We're talking about government money, taxpayer money that is being spent in large amounts with very little accountability to show that you've actually that children have actually learned, right? But you can graduate them. You can move them through in cohorts. Hey, good job, good job, good job. But we don't actually know if they're proficient in some of the core basics, right?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna start there, and I want to hear your initial thoughts on this topic. I know we've talked about this extensively, but before we jump into two of these examples, like what's your quick take on the topic, Charles?
Yeah, I think it's some bullshit, and I think we're on our own. And what I mean by that is like I don't think, I think that if you are having lower proficiency, but you're seeing a boost in graduation rates, and it's around our people, it's around minoritized people, it's around poor people, I think that doesn't bode well for us. And I think that it's platitudes in the place of actual progress. And I think that could be very dangerous. And I think that we have to be in a place as a people, any of us. I can talk to my group, you can talk to your group, we can talk to the intersection of these groups or whatever the case is. But we got to stop being okay with the parade and ask for the progress. You got to get things that you need, because they'll give you a dog and pony show all the time. They'll change the standards. And this is something personal for me because I'm the author of, of Dump the D. And Dump the D was bastardized and turned into something else by OUSD, Oakland Unified School District, where they thought I was saying, just don't give out no more Ds. And that wasn't what I was saying at all. I wasn't saying these kids just so we can pass them. What I was saying was I was letting people know how dangerous a D was in our system. It could be worse than an F because it didn't trigger you to retake a class if you wanted your kid to go to a CSU or a UC. So I think that's an easy way out of things, to just pass kids along, push kids through. And there's a lot of people, there's a lot of grown men and grown women of all races, of all income levels, to be quite honest with you, that are functioning illiterate people in our country. So, I mean, I think, I try to train people that I care about to ask about proficiency, ask if your kid has mastered this thing, regardless of what the grades say on their report.
Exactly.
I just think that you have to know that. And I think that if you don't ask it, they're not going to tell you.
Right. Exactly. Grades are a very interesting thing. Like I've had this conversation with the school that my child attends, right? And he has 6 different teachers, and I keep asking them, I'm like, what is the school's grading policy? We don't have one. We leave it up to the teachers. All right. So that means you have 6 human beings that are creating their own systems that can be manipulated either way, right? To work against students. Both are basically to work against students in different ways that can be too punitive, in a way where, like, if you have one assignment that's weighted very heavily and the student doesn't do well on it, all of a sudden their grade drops. Or it can be used to inflate grades, when students aren't doing well, but the grades seem to show that they are doing well. I remember when you and Dirk, RIP, rest in paradise, Dirk, were doing work in looking at Oakland and looking at their graduation rates. And I remember I chimed into your conversation at some point, and I'm like, okay, this is good, but let's look at the graduation rates versus the college A through G rates, right? And that's when you started to see like the big gaps, right? And we weren't even looking at like test scores. We were not even looking at test scores because that would even show like another reality. But that's what we're gonna talk about, that piece today. And so let's before we do that, we do have a little video clip. Might be a good time to show it. So we talk about education here. We're both educators. We work in the space, but I always appreciate it when we hear other voices from the community, in this case, the hip hop entrepreneurship community. Dame Dash is here on a podcast, Willie D's podcast, formerly of the Ghetto Boys, right?
Boys, they're not formally. They still a group. They just don't make music. They just older. That's all.
I know, but Bushwhack Bill has left this heavenly earth. So that's what I'm saying. But in this podcast that he's done, he kind of breaks it down, in a way that maybe is I don't know, maybe in a way that's more like relatable. But
There was nothing that person was doing or had that I wanted. There was no knowledge they can give me. Like, I work with the OSG. That's a couple of hundred black principals or principals from economically challenged places. And what they tell me and what I've learned, a couple of things. Number one, if your reading scores are low, you go into jail. That's the metrics. That's the algorithm, you know. Number two, if you give a kid love, but you don't teach them how to survive or how to read, you're hurting them. Number three, a kid can only retain 45 minutes of an 8-hour day anyway, so their class should only be 15 minutes. So the rest of the stuff they give you was a distraction, the things you don't need to know. A kid is on his phone all day. So why wouldn't you put school on the phone on demand, 15-minute classes, and have it done by a person that inspires them? Because you might not want them inspired. Why would you waste 8 hours of a day? Really, it's a babysitter. You know, that's what school is used for most parents. But why do parents mostly have to take care or put their kids in school? Because they got to go to work. So it's all to divide. I go to the kids' prisons in Chicago, right? I go to this prison, it's a kids' school in a prison, no windows, no outdoor space. As soon as they get there, they drugging them up. It's called the CUT program. And the line item is therapy. They tell you the more drugs you take, the quicker you can go home. I'm going through the jail. I'm seeing all of this. And I'm asking the superintendent, because the principal's the one that put me on. And I'm like, they keep talking about de-escalation. I'm like, but what's their reading scores? 4th grade. You know the recidivism rate will be 100% then. 4th grade, but you're going to put them back in the street addicted to a drug. The only time they can get it back is they get back into jail with no education. After you just mentally abuse them and kept them breathing recycled air, they don't get to go outside. You know, no therapy. The only therapy they had was white women in there, walking around with jackets around their waist, all in a group. How can a white woman talk to a kid with a body without being scared of judging them? And how could a therapist not know that? So I'm like, well, why are you doing this? Oh, I know why you're doing it. Why you don't even have a black woman why isn't there a man in here to teach these kids how to be men? Because it's a cycle to get them used to coming back. Now, the worst part about it is for every kid that's in that jail, $1.2 million a kid. And the kid can't even afford to get a toothbrush. They don't get none of that money. So it's a private sector jail.
Yeah. So he kind of broke it down there, huh? In a number of different levels. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that clip, Charles.
Well, one, man, I'm from that I'm from that generation of people that grew up with early Jay-Z and Rockefeller and Dame. And, Dame means a lot to me. It's just as far as entrepreneurship. I've always been a burgeoning entrepreneur. Listen to him, watch what they did over there. I think that I'd have to look into some numbers. That's the researcher in me or whatever the case is. But I think the general gist of what he is saying is spot on, and I think it's important. I think to understand the larger plan that people have for kids that look like me and kids that look like you, that are vulnerable, that may not have both parents or parents, don't have the bread or whatever the case is. Any type of young person where those streets can be enticing or trouble can be right around the corner. I think there is a plan. I think there's a plan to, we're a country that really loves money. So if we can make a lot of money off of prisoners, if we can make a lot of money off your kid being dumb or being a DJ or getting in and out of trouble or whatever the case is, why don't you think that somebody would be doing that? And I harken back to when I was in elementary schools. I harken back to when I was in school myself, and just even with the quote unquote success that people may see or have or whatnot, it's a lot of unlearning. It's a lot of rethinking. It's a big metamorphosis that I still need to do even at 40, that doesn't kill me or kill my people in my community. There's a reprogramming that has to happen. So that's what Dame is talking about. And he's talking about it not to teachers. He's not talking about it to the people in ed reform or the ed space or the conservatives or the liberals. He's talking to people that look like him and come from where he comes from. And I appreciate that. I mean, that's kind of what I want our stuff to be, right? Like to cut through the jargon, cut through all the big terminology or whatever the flavor of the week is for this month, and really just talk to people, to you, around what's happening with your kid, what's at stake for you, and here are some ways that you can combat that. So, you know, that's my overall kind of arching view, but I was long-winded, so I'm gonna throw it back to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think he broke down like several. If you listen to it carefully, and I think with my ear, your ear, like what I heard was number one, he identifies the literacy issue, right? He's like, that's a basic building block, a tool, a foundation. Okay. Mm-hmm. And without that, then we roll over and we can start talking about the connection between the school to prison pipeline, right? And he's not talking about adult prisons. He's talking about youth, juvenile prisons. And then are we talking about, what kind of, are we talking about a punitive environment or an environment of rehabilitation, right? And then he also talks about the recidivism issue, right? Recidivism rates, for young people coming out of particular types of institutions are generally very high, right? But it tracks back to what we're talking about, which is what happens in the early years, not in the home. This is not a conversation about were mom and dad there or what was home life like. This is a conversation about what K through 12 public education is responsible for, right? And if young people are not learning to read at a particular time, it sets in motion, a whole other course of sequenced events, which eventually, unfortunately, can lead to incarceration. He also talks about he kind of blows up the idea of why are we still operating off of an 8-hour school day with long classes, doing basically what we've been doing for 100 years, right? Utilize technology, blow up the school day, right? He also talks about in this prison school for young people, he talks about the need to have teachers and educators that look like the children. How many times have we talked about that on this show? Look at the work that, Sharif El-Mekki is doing at the center, right? So all of these things are kind of coming together. And so I thought that was a very powerful clip because it, he's hitting a lot of the points that we've talked about. And I'm glad that people are speaking up about this. So with that.
But I think we could be innovative. And I think that's something that he was, I think, there's a better way that we can kind of be doing this. And you know what I'm saying? When you talk about reconstruction.us, Kai Henderson's organization, where you can take those classes at your own pace. Have you ever heard of Jawanza Kunjufu?
I have not.
Jawanza Kunjufu is one of my favorite scholars, authors. He was on Oprah a long time ago. He's out here in Chicago. But I remember reading this book when I first read it, when I first got into education. It's called Countering the Conspiracy to Destroy Black Boys. And it's part of the reason that I do what I do, and just how frank it is, how direct it is. And this was originally written a long time ago, so some things might need to be updated or whatever the case was, but the spirit of it still lives on. And I mean, you can also apply this to girls or brown boys, or whatever the case is. The point is that somebody has to basically tell you enough information so we can't continue to put our heads in the sand about this stuff, right? So, and it sucks. I'm always honest. I'm not talking about fair. None of the shit that I'm saying is about fair. It's not fair that you got to go beyond your kids' grades and ask if they proficient. It's not fair if you got to ask your kids' school, especially if they black or brown, what the discipline policy is. It's not fair that you have to over communicate with that teacher or over communicate with that principal at that school. None of this is fair. But we're not talking about fair. We're talking about survival. We're talking about thriving. We're talking about, a system that has not served us well in mass since ever, especially post-Brown versus Board of Education. So when we talk about, now when there is a thing that says that graduation rates are going up and proficiency is going down, you were very elegant when we started this, David, and you talked about the graphs. Forget all that. If graduation should not be going up, if proficiency is going down, that I'm not saying we got to fail all our kids. What I'm saying is that you have to inspect that line. You have to inspect like what is going on in that factory. There's something from when, if you look at this like the Ford Motor Company, there's something at the beginning of that assembly line and the end of that assembly line. Something drastic is happening on that line. Sometimes you got to stop the line. You got to be like, look, man, we are poisoning our product. We are hurting the people that we're supposed to be helping. And we don't have the apparatus in place right now because everything is over politicized that allows us to even ask questions. You got to be so dug in. So, you know, I just think that that's just really important. And I just want our people to wake up, because you're the one that has to live with the consequences of what happens to your child. It's just you and them. It really is. So you can piss people off all day, but ask those questions and know what you're asking them.
Yeah, exactly. And if you are a consumer, if you are in the market looking for educational services for your children, you should definitely be asking about graduation rates. Those are important. They should be able to show that to you in a number of different ways. We call it like disaggregated, but basically it means it'll show you what those numbers look like for different groups, right? And beyond that, you should also ask about, you should ask for test scores, period. You should ask for, if they're showing you, high graduation rates and this and that, you should be asking them about test scores to see if they're, they're never going to be the same, but like, there shouldn't be a 50-point gap. And you should ask about chronic absenteeism. You should ask about, here's a good one, right? What does discipline look like at your school? Share some discipline data, right? So you have a school that has 20% African-American and 20% Latino students, right? And if 80% of the students that are being disciplined and suspended are Black and brown, it's a similar thing. You have a disproportionality is what we call it. But let's talk about, so we're going to talk about a couple things here. We're going to talk about DC schools, so Washington, DC public schools. And I'm going to go through this very quickly because they're basically all saying the same thing. There's a recent report that came out about DC public schools, and I'll read the headlines for you. Again, a drop in test scores, significant, and high absenteeism among students. So students are not showing that they're learning, and they're not even showing up. At the same time, and this is not funny, but I mean it's crazy. At the same time, you have rising graduation rates. Mm-hmm. Like if they're not even showing up, and I'm talking about all students, and if they're demonstrating that they're not learning the subjects, right? But the graduation rates are going up, that's a significant issue that we need to talk about. It's not just a DC issue, it's a national issue. We know that. And who is being most highly impacted by it? So you say this all the time. What's the thing that you say when the U.S. gets a cold? What do Black people get?
America gets pneumonia, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Black America.
And so Black and brown and low income students are even higher. They're impacted at higher rates. In the DC public schools, specifically looking at Black high school seniors and their college readiness indicators, right? Mm-hmm. So that's DC. We looked at another local example. Well, let me go to California. I'm just going to put out some numbers here. I just looked these up today. This is not going to shock you, Charles, but this is pretty wild. Looking at California, so the headline for California is that African American students have about a 90% graduation rate, right? Which is great, right? That's a very positive number. When we look at African American students in California public schools in terms of proficiency across the board, For English language arts, it's at about 30%.
Mhm.
For math, it's at about 16%. So 16% of Black students in California public schools are proficient in math. 30% are proficient in English language arts, yet the state system is graduating 90% of them.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because graduation rates tends to be a stat that you can use to get funding, or that's why absenteeism is such a huge issue, because funding is tied to your count and who goes or whatnot, and then graduation rates is something else that people later had on. So you have to kind of attack that stuff at the source. And so what I mean is, and I'm not saying flunk all of our kids. I am saying, as the internet would say, the math is not math. And how is it that 90% of our kids are graduating, but only 30% of them can read, and 16% of them can mess around with numbers? And here's what the data is telling me. It's telling me a few things. One is saying that there's a lot of stuff with the system. Got it. Like the system, there's poverty, there's racism, there's all these systemic things that I am not forgetting about. Okay. I just want to make sure I say that. And there are things that have to be done in the meantime, because the system is not going to change tomorrow. So what does that look like? What does that mean on your end? What does that mean for holding your school accountable? And I think that you have to draw a line in the sand. But the data is also telling me we need to have more vocation programs in these schools. Like if let's just stop acting like we trying to teach kids how to read and we trying to teach kids numbers. Like, if that's the case, go back to the time where you could graduate with a certificate, or you could graduate ready to work in certain fields. I mean, I think that's one. I think two, I think that when young people are tracked for college and university or whatever the case is, we have to make sure that they are proficient. When I graduated, I went to Emory, small school. I left my senior year, but I still graduated pretty high. I had like a 383. I was in AP everything at Emory, David. Like I did, I had the weighted GPA and all that good stuff. When I got to college, bro, I was remedial everything. So why am I getting B's and A's in AP math, AP English, AP this, AP science? They also didn't have us take the AP exam, by the way, FYI. You have to know that on your own at the time. And basically what it is, it allowed them to use me to brag about certain things. This is our special and gifted program, special and gifted kid, but I wasn't special nor gifted. I went to school and had to do a whole year remediation. And so there are things that you have to just ask. And even now, with all the degrees, I have to read stuff. It takes me a long time. I read things over and over and over. I take a lot of notes. I highlight a lot. I have to, because my comprehension of what I learned in school, while I might have been better than a lot of people around me, in the grand scheme of things, it was still very, very, very low. And that's not a shot. That's not a diss. It's just the facts. I have very high self-esteem of myself, but it's the facts. I have to work very, very hard now, right? So,
yep.
And we have to be ready to tell the truth about that, man. Make sure that you send your kid up so they can do this thing called life. I just don't think that we're preparing. I think we're raising a pauper society. For those that don't, a pauper, is the prince and the pauper tends to be the poorer class, the working class, or whatnot. Growing up in Oakland, which is one of the most expensive places in the world to live right now, OUSD is not preparing people to be entrepreneurs. It's not preparing people to be wealthy. It's not preparing people to be CEOs. It is preparing them to be part of the lowest ring of the working class. And then when I introduce new educational options or models, there are a lot of people that's fighting that, but their kids tend to not be the people that are in that system or with the foresight to see what path this is on, because those kids graduating in OUSD today, the vast majority of them will not be able to afford to live in Oakland independently tomorrow. And hence the problem.
Yeah. It's it compounds on itself. So there's also this new thing. Well, it's not a new thing. So you mentioned it earlier. There has been a new revitalized focus on vocational programming, right? Which I totally support, right? I support. I think it makes sense to get to bring programming into schools that mirror what different career opportunities can look like. So you're not just doing it in the abstract, but you're actually bringing in different types of work centers or labs, or even sending students out into the real world to get like that experience through internships. It's called work-based learning. People call it different things in different places. Totally support that. The other thing, and I don't know what this looks like in other states, but in California, we have this shift from there's always a shift to like reinvent schools, and it's happening in California through the new community schools based model, right? So community school is a school, but it kind of broadens the definition of what a school can be. It has deeper partnerships with community-based organizations, extended services and hours, has integrated student supports, social, emotional, physical health, in-house, deeper engagement with community, collaborative leadership practices. All of those things are important. But the one thing that is not clear in any model that I've seen around a community school program is like they just don't talk enough about academics, right? It's like we're not, the academics are like secondary in this model, and people tend to overcomplicate standardized testing, right? Standardized testing is based on standards, and standards should be incorporated into curriculum and incorporated into lesson plans, right? So there's no mystery as to what's going to be on the standardized test. It's like, if it's the wrong information, let's fix it. But just to totally ignore that, I feel like is the problem, right? And so we're putting money into schools that have, on the outside looks like innovative programming, but the actual core indicators are still horrific, and in many cases dropping, right?
Yeah, I mean, listen, you're brown, I'm black, and this whole thing about testing is always a thing that comes up, and people will attack us in these ways, right? So let me just, I know the whole thing about teach it to the test. I know there are people that opt out of tests. I'm good with that. I actually, listen, if the test is racist and these things, I went to higher ed. I've done those things. I've seen the studies or whatnot, and you can do away with it. You just need to put something else there. I need an apparatus that allows us to measure the amount of learning and standards that is being reached or not reached, so there can be intervention. So it's okay to hate this current test and say people teaching to it is not culturally. I got you. I'm with you, and I'm going to rock with that. And they've been saying that since I was a child in school, and there still ain't a new test. There still ain't a new way to test standards, right? You want to make sure that those things happen. And what I would say is this, man, if I'm giving people, advice, how would an emperor educate his son? How would a queen educate her daughter? So a lot of people care about Rome these days. Not sure why. I used to like that stuff. If you look at Marcus Aurelius, I don't know if you ever studied that. He's he was the emperor of Rome, all that Ottoman Empire area and all that good stuff. But he had a son named Commodus. And the way Commodus wanted to be emperor. Now Rome was a democracy. So you don't just become emperor because of who your father was. So his father put him through an education. And in that education, he made sure he understood numbers. He made sure he understood negotiations. He made sure he understood history. When he taught his son politics, he didn't just teach him who ran before and who did all that. He taught him how to negotiate. He taught him when the Senate will try to assassinate you, when you should assassinate somebody, like real things. Like it was very different when the father was the one that was in charge of the education. He needed his son to be able to fight. So Narcissus was one of his best warriors, one of his best fighters. And basically he just beat Commodus's ass every day until he could actually defend himself, right? Now, Commodus didn't grow up and become a very good emperor, by the way. If you watch Gladiator or any history, there's a whole interesting story there. But the point is like, look at how people with power try to educate their kids. And then look at what they say is good enough for yours. Like, just look at those things. Like, I love technology. I love Apple products. I've sat on boards with one of the people that made one of the algorithms for Meta, for Facebook, of how to make money. And you know what that man does? He does not let his kid touch social media. His children can't touch it. Bill Gates' kids couldn't mess with it. You know what I mean? When people are doing those things in your face and don't hide it, you should ask questions. You should understand and wonder why. So I appreciate what Dame Dash was doing. I just feel that in fear that it's going to fall on deaf ears. And I think that we are so worried about the wrong thing, about looking good online, trying to perpetuate this perfection that none of us has, trying to be holier than thou, trying to cancel other people, whatever the case is. I'm a part of this gang, you part of that gang, I'm a part of this group, you a part of that group, all that stuff. And I think that those distractions are things that poor people will have to pay for because powerful people are playing a very different game. And let me get off of my rant, but I feel very, very strongly about it. I feel strongly when I see that there's always some mess. Like social media is nothing but mess. It is always, we are more attracted to controversy. We're more attracted to mess than we are about things that can improve our lives, improve our society. And we are starting to see what that's doing to our society. And every empire has fallen. Every single one. The Chinese Empire, the Roman Empire, and the United States is an empire. I hope that fall does not happen in my lifetime. I would not be surprised.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, speaking of social media, I guess less social media, but more just media in general. Like historically, I read books. I don't really read education journals, but I definitely read education media to learn new things. But more and more lately, I've been listening to, shifting how I consume media to listening to people's stories, right? And we're not talking about, people in higher education. We're not talking about people in education or even education reform. Some of my deepest learning in the last year or two have come from listening to direct stories of people that are either my age or your age that have done long periods, stints in prison, right? And they've come out, right? And they've learned, they've educated themselves, they've come out with this incredibly deep ability to reflect not just on their own journey, right? How they got there and how they got out. That's all just kind of part of the story, right? That's the filler, right? Talking about, getting locked up in solitary or, getting involved in different, things while locked up in prison. But the ability for them to go back and trace back their story of when they joined a gang, or when they got kicked out of school, or when they couldn't get a job, or when they got first engaged with the police, the criminal justice system, over some bullshit, right? And 9 times out of 10, there's always a story in there about how public education failed them, right? And so it's basically the same thing that we're talking about today in different language, about what can actually happen. You can sit back and look at the was it 90% graduation rate in California for Black students, right? That should tell you that all of the other life indicators for African Americans in California should look similar. But when we look at California prisons, Americans are overrepresented, right? African Americans earn less, they own less property, all of these things. So we, point being is we have to look beyond the big headline, which you said earlier can be used as a marketing tool, right? Hey, look, we're doing really good on this one indicator, but the real story lies underneath. And that's why we look at the data in different ways. But you also have to couple that with, so many of these stories that are out there from people. You have a story, I have a story, right? About what happened to us. And when we were at those points, right? You're going to go this way, you're going to go this way, right? And so I just think that's interesting because, yeah, I mean, I've been listening. I send you podcasts all the time, right? I'm like, check this out. You're probably like, what the hell is this?
Oh, you can always, but I used to be really upset at the getting stung by the scorpion, but that's what scorpions do. That's their nature. They sting. And so when I'm if we keep trying to put something on this system that it has showed us over and over and over again that is not, that is in life, creatures are going to be their nature. Like, and the system is its own thing that's going to be its nature. And I think that you have to. I can stay mad at that system, and I can keep trying to change it, and I will keep trying to change it on some level. But I can't get mad at a scorpion for being a scorpion. I can't get mad at a lion like eating a gazelle. Like, that's just what happens. And I think that this is your kids are gazelles, and this system is lions. You know why? Because they're still making tons of money at the behest of those kids. When COVID happened, a windfall of money came, and we lost whole children that some have not even been found yet, man. So I can keep going down here. What I will continue to do, though, is try to help you survive in that jungle. Like, you are in a jungle, and I need you to recognize that you're in the jungle, and that some of this stuff, there are some apex predators out there, and you need to know how to defend yourself and how to make sure you got the tools to make sure your kid or you are good in it. And or you can keep getting mad at the scorpion for being a scorpion. So, and the picture behind you, man, I know we're coming up on time. The picture behind you, I saw Killers of the Flower Moon, and it kept reminding me of that. I don't know if you've seen that yet or have heard that story, but the story of the Osage and the oil, and it's a real story. It's very interesting. It's on Apple TV Plus. If you have that, it's free on there now. And it's a very well acted movie, but it's infuriating. But it also has some questions for me. But I didn't know if you said you hadn't seen it. I don't know how familiar you are with the Osage or that story. I can give you the synopsis if you want, but kind of goes in with this.
All right. Okay. So we're close to time. So I want to let's flip it now, Charles. Let's think. You were just talking about. You've always said that we are on our own. And
we are.
We absolutely are. Whether you're talking about, we're talking about shifting large scale education systems that just from a dynamic, position are hard to change. But then if the system is working for particular groups and not for others, there's less incentive to want to change it, right? I think what's his name? Howard Fuller said it best, right? People like change until it's time to actually change things or something like that, right? And so what are your, let's just focus on like big education systems. What are your what's one big thing or two things that you think we can actually change in terms of like public education to shift some of these outcomes?
I think there should be so many different variations of education. Like, I think that there should be tracks where you can try different things, whether it's different vocations, whether it's different disciplines. I think that you should introduce a lot of that earlier. And I think that, the system should kind of be a grow as you go type of situation. Like, if you and I are in the same type of grade or going for different things, and you happen to be more proficient quicker than I am, you should be able to move on. And I should be able to spend whatever time that I need to do that in order to get good. I think I would do a passport model. In that model, meaning you can get different skills and different things that you can accumulate that go on your jacket. And you have to be proficient to move on to the next one. I think those are things that I would really kind of focus on. Less time-bound, time-based, kind of check of a box, but more of like, what do you want to be? What is the thing that you want to be later on? And be able to track it in that kind of way and push that way. And I think that you can do that. I think that your school might not do it, especially if you're in a certain place. But I think if you got a library, you got museums, there's a lot of things in communities like ours that are free, that are kind of being offered. I think that you make those offerings. I think that people couple together and come together, and they should come to somebody in a community. If there's like a David Castillo and David's really good at this thing, it's like, hey, David, can we all just chip in and like twice out of the week, can the kids meet in your garage with you and you just lecture on this? Like, you don't need to ask for that. And I think that there's really smart people in our communities. I think that there's a lot of entrepreneurs. I think that our young people, like, I don't know how to do anything around the home or fix it or build it. I think that there are skills that we are losing. And if something really happens, that we're going to be in real trouble. If we have to go through another industrial age, so to speak, there's going to be a part of this population that's going to do very well and a part that will not. And, South Park just parodied it, and I think they did a good parody on it because.
Oh, wow, I got to check that out.
Yeah, it's really good. It was basically nobody could change a light bulb. Like, no, everybody had money. So the migrant workers became the rich people in town because it's like, oh, I was going to pay you $50 to fix the sink. It was like, hey, he paying me $1,000 to fix the sink. So because nobody could fix the sink. But it's very interesting. So those are some of the beginnings of my thoughts as you got me about this movie now. But yes.
Yeah, I think, my top two are more like my foundational. I think number one, and we heard that in the interview earlier, is, doing the work to make sure that not just teachers, but like leaders, support staff that are working in schools are reflective of the children that attend those schools from the same communities, right? And so why is that important? Because when you have that connection, like if you are working in a school from the vantage point of an adult, and when you know the children, you're familiar with their stories, they are your children, right? It adds another layer of accountability and care to the work, right? The work is real. It's not just a job. You're like doing mission-driven work. And then from the vantage point of children and young people, you see people, you are familiar with people, you are comfortable with people that look like you. I'm not saying everybody, but I'm just saying like me growing up in 12 years of public school, probably had like 2 or 3 Latino teachers. That was it, And so I think doing that, making sure that we're working towards, and that there's some accountability in systems where you have an overwhelming number of like white teachers that are teaching in schools that serve predominantly children of color. Like that's an issue that the system has to fix. Mm-hmm. Number 2 is related, and it's like this time that we're living in when people are pushing book bans and anti-CRT. What was the last thing I saw in Oklahoma? Man, they're wilding out in Oklahoma, right? They just pulled the Tulsa race riots from the curriculum, right? Shit didn't happen, right? So, did you see that?
Man, it's so much stuff, dog. Like, if you give me the particulars, I'll probably remember it, man. But
yeah. So, so the point there is making sure that that all children see themselves and their stories in the curriculum, right? And it feels like right now we're moving away towards a more a whitewashed curriculum where you're going to hear and see fewer Black, Brown, Asian, LGBTQ voices, right? And so so that's the second big thing that I would put out there around like, what could we do if we could do something? There's all the technical pieces of incorporating the science of reading and blowing up the school day to be more flexible, all of that too. But that's kind of that's my my 2 offerings at this moment, right? Yeah. I'm working through my rage.
Well, and I would even say too, I think the education reforms that we need also shouldn't have an age limit on it. I think that it should be stuff that's just open for the full community, almost like a college campus. Like, mm-hmm. I remember being an undergrad and seeing a 50-year-old person in there getting that education with us. And I think that there's a lot of things we weren't taught. And I think community teaching, community universities is invisible institutions are really important. So, don't, like you said, don't get me going, man. I think that, but if you keep looking to the teeth that's poisoning you to no longer poison you, then you're gonna keep drinking poison. It just like, I know that there's a law. I know there's laws that say you gotta send your kids to school. So follow the law, that's fine. But that don't stop you from putting your kid in different programs or making sure they're experiencing different things or making sure they get a different kind of education. Like if you got people in your family that's good with their hands, then get them a beer, get them something, you know, make them some dinner, and be like, hey, can you teach my son how to do this? Or like one of the best classes I had in high school, and I think they should bring back, was home ec. Home ec was just really, really dope. And the way it was taught to me around how to manage my bank account, and if I got into an apartment by myself, and she taught us some meals that you can always go to if things are rough, like life skill stuff. And you know, I think you have to go back to that. We care about how people feel right now. We teach people how to mask those feelings, or to manipulate those feelings, or how they talk about them, more than we're teaching people how to build things and create things that they can be proud of. And you know, you get what you get at some point.
Yeah, bring back home ec. There you go. You heard it right here. We've got. I want to do a special shout out to welcoming back Mr. Bill Conrad.
I know, man. He's been gone for a minute.
Been gone, but good to see him here, and good to see
you because I'm off of Facebook, and I think that's where he used to watch. I think we lost a lot of people when I left Facebook, so I'm glad he found his way to YouTube and his and his kid. But we got Mama Toya here, who always holds me. I love that woman.
Yep. All right. Well, we are approaching the end.
I need you to watch that movie because I want to talk to you about it.
Yes. Okay. I'll watch it.
And just the synopsis, I know we're at the end. Sorry, but it is happening around the time that Tulsa happened, and it's about the Osage like native community, and they basically found oil, and they were the richest people in America. And then these white folks moved there because they needed people to work that land and all that stuff. And then systematically, these white people. You got to ask the question again, Miss Toya, so I don't miss it. We missed the question.
It's right there. How about the pics behind you? Oakland Biggie, Malcolm, and Tupac.
What about? I don't know what the question is. That's not a question.
I'm not sure. Yeah.
Yes, that's Biggie, that's Kanye West, and that's Tupac. But back what I was saying. So basically, the white folks systematically, like, they moved there and they would marry into these families to get the head rights. And then they were murdering these people. So it was basically, but they kept wanting to mix. And let me tell you the other thing that was, I need you to watch it, David, because I'm conflicted. Because let me tell you, there was a scene where there's a parade, and it starts out with the Osage at the front doing their thing. It's a mix of native and white people in the middle, and at the end, it's closed off by the Klan. So my whole feelings about what was happening to these people. It was some complicated feelings in that point because they loved them, some white people. The point is, it was a very interesting moment in our history, and it's also part of those book bans. It's telling that Osage story and Tulsa and all that. So I think it'll be interesting, and it has Leo and all that. I know you was like, you gonna get something out about that damn movie, but anytime I watch a movie that's 3.5 hours, I'm talking about it with somebody. So
what's it called again? What's it called?
Killers of the Flower Moon.
Got it. Okay, I'm on it. I got it.
It's Scorsese, it's Leo, it's Robert De Niro, Lily Gladstone, who did an incredible job, by the way. She was incredible. But anyway, man, I appreciate you putting this show together. Next week we should have our people back. I don't know if you are able to give your final thoughts. So let me get out the way and let you do that. And Miss Toya, you still got time. Give me the question one more time while he's doing the final thought, and I'll make sure I address it. But go ahead, brother. What's your final thought for the day?
Yeah, I mean, I think I pretty much put everything out there already. I think, two things for me quickly is I want to keep uplifting this information, right? Especially now, it doesn't feel like enough people are talking about it. Like you would think superintendents would be talking about it. And other education leaders and politicians, right? We're spending so many, millions of dollars on education, right? And if you had to sit back and ask what we are getting for it, it would be very difficult for people to answer you with a straight face, right? And then if you ask, like, what are Black and brown children getting out of it? And then you would just get silence, right? So I want to push into that silence. I want to make sure that we continue to talk about this. That's why we started the show and the podcast. And then I think the second thing is, as like I said earlier, I continue to evolve, like where I'm getting my information from. And I'm watching a lot of different podcasts and different formats. and like where I'm getting my information from. And I'm going more towards, like, we call it primary source documentation. If you're a historian, don't read the interpreted, version of history. Go to the original source, right? So like interviews, people telling their own stories through podcasts, and hopefully that starts to show up more and more on the show. So there you go.
Well, I gave my final thought for Jubilee. For Omar, that's David. I am Charles. We will see you next week. Same bat time, same bat station. And y'all take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And if you are in anywhere other than San Diego where it's hot, please stay warm. Stay warm and shovel your snow, because I learned as a homeowner, you can be sued if the mailman trips and falls. With that, yes. See y'all. Y'all be blessed. Peace.